When I told the recruiter that I couldn't swim, the recruiter told me something interesting. The recruiter told me that I would be taught how to swim in basic training, which seemed reasonable to me. But I didn't have any family members close to me that had served in the military, so I didn't have anybody that I could ask about what was coming. I just assumed that the recruit, like, why would they lie? Why would they lie and tell me that I'm going to sign a contract where swimming is definitely required? And why would they then tell me that, oh, they'll teach you how to swim when I openly admit, hey, I don't know how to swim? Well, they lie because it's a tactic to get you to sign the contract. Because if I fail out of the special forces training, I would still go to an infantry unit or a combat unit. And at the time, they were struggling to fill all those ranks, whether it be infantry, special forces, whatever the case may be. They needed bodies, and so if they dangled a carrot in front of a motivated, physically active young man, this carrot of, do you really want to serve your country, son? Then you should go be a Green Beret. Well, and that was a magic trick to then get me to go be an infantryman somewhere if there was a risk that I might fail out. Either way, the recruiter gets a little bit of a bonus for getting me to sign a combat contract. And so I realized in basic training that the recruiter had just lied to me to get me to sign the contract. And I'm not saying that all military recruiters do this. This particular person that I dealt with did this. Now, here's the deal. Unlike with engineering and all this disappointment that I went through because engineering didn't work out, remember, I was dead set on doing this. Like, I wanted to try. And so when I got towards the end of basic training and realized that I wasn't going to be taught how to swim, I was like, okay, whatever. Like, I know that every military base has a pool there. I can either find local classes at the YMCA to teach me how to swim while I'm in the Q course. The Q course is a qualification course, the qualification course to become a Green Beret or a Special Forces soldier. So I can find YMCA classes, I can read books, I can look at YouTube videos, and I can just go get in the pool every day and try to figure it out. I also got buddies around me. While I was in basic training, I met people from all over the country. So there were some guys who had been to military academy. There was a guy there who had been a college swimmer. I could probably find somebody to help me figure it out. But once I graduated basic training, I ended up meeting somebody who helped me kind of move my confidence level to another level. And it's this guy, I call him Sergeant Smith because I want to protect his privacy. That's not his real name. But Sergeant Smith, he was a qualified combat diver in the military. And this means that he had been to dive school down in Key West, Florida, and he was as competent in the water as like a Navy SEAL. And so he was kind of like a liaison. At the time, I was at Fort Benning, Georgia, and then we were going to go up to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where all the Special Forces training took place. And he was like a liaison from the training pipeline. And he asked me, did I have any issues? And I told him, well, yeah, I don't know how to swim. And he was like, okay, meet me at this pool on base at Fort Benning, like the next day. And so I show up to the pool. I got a buddy with me who I went through basic training and airborne school with. He's just there for moral support. He had been a stud physically, and he had gone to military academy. He was going to the Ranger Regiment, and so like he was like somebody I would consider the ideal candidate for this kind of training. So he knew how to swim. He was physically a beast. Like, he would crush the PT test every time we took it. PT is physical training, or the physical fitness test in the military. And so he came with me just kind of as moral support. And so when I showed up, I show up ready to get in the pool, and I'm thinking we're just going to go over some basic swim technique. Well, Sergeant Smith shows up as well, but he's got his normal dress uniform on. And so it's very clear that he's not going to get in the pool. And so I'm wondering what we're going to do. And so he walks us into the pool area, and along the side of the pool by the deep end, there was this locker. And he walked up, it's this gray locker. I still remember the color. He walks up to the locker, opens the door, grabs out this blue brick that he pulls out. And before I can even say anything, he throws the brick into the deep end of the pool. And the deep end of the pool was 15 feet deep. And the deepest water I had ever been in my life at that point was like waist high, like an apartment pool, like an apartment complex pool. And in the book, I talk about like there was this time where I got pushed into a pool when I was little and almost drowned, came within inches of my life, whatever. So, all that to say, I was terrified of the water. And growing up, I was always, because I was so overweight, I was real self conscious having my shirt off. So, I always avoided the water. And so I'm 24, 25. I'm 20, maybe 26 years old at the time, 25 or 26. And the deepest water I've ever been in is waist deep. Sergeant Smith just threw a brick into the pool. It's 15 feet deep, and my stomach like jumped up into my throat. And I'm like, who? In my head, I'm thinking, who does he think is going to get that brick? Well, he looked at me and he says, Travis, it would suck if that lifeguard over there, it was this young lady, maybe 19 or 20 years old, couldn't have weighed more than about 100 pounds. She was a lifeguard on duty. And he was like, it would suck if that young lady would have to get wet to go to the bottom of the pool to get this brick because you were too scared to go get it. And so he started pushing my buttons emotionally. And he just told me real simple, this is a water confidence exercise. So what I want you to do, and this is him explaining it to me. He says, what I want you to do, Travis, is I want you to dive into the pool with your hands clasped overhead like a spear, and you'll descend all the way down. You'll grab the brick, squat off the bottom of the pool, push up, and with the brick overhead, and you'll float right up, put the pool on the deck, and then we're done for the day. He said by basically he wanted to expose me kind of to the depth of my fear, and he wanted me to overcome it, and that would help me progress as I began learning how to swim. And so, like, man, my stomach was churning, man, like nausea. I probably felt like I had to go to the bathroom. And anyway, whatever. So anyway, I turn away from him after he proposes this to me, and I kind of like said a little prayer. And then I started doing I started doing some risk calculation in my head. And what I reasoned was real simple. I had the lifeguard, I had Sergeant Smith, and I had my buddy who was going to Ranger Regiment, who knew how to swim, who was a physical stud. I had these three individuals there at the pool with me. If I dove in and something went wrong, between the three of them, they'd figure out a way to get me out of that pool. I was fairly confident in that. And then the next thing I thought about was, again, here's the power of story. This is when story goes right, y'all. I just thought about all the bullying and teasing I went through growing up. I thought about all the people calling me ungrateful when I quit that engineering job. And I mean, I just ran through different people's faces in my head through my history. And I was just, in the article, I say I had to reach down into my bag of trauma to overcome this obstacle. I was like finding that rage, and I was getting ready to use it to push past my fears, push past the emotional blinders, folks. And man, I turned around and I dove in the pool just like Sergeant Smith said. Went down to the bottom, grabbed the brick, came back up, put it on the deck. And when I got out of that pool, folks, like the sense of accomplishment that I felt was incredible. It was amazing. And the reason I tell that story is because at this point, I hadn't even been to selection. Selection is where you try out to see if they'll let you go to the 2-year qualification course to become a Green Beret. I had just completed basic training, infantry basic training, and airborne school. So there was no Green Beret yet. I wasn't like deep into the training yet. This story about the pool is still my favorite, even over combat, everything. This is still my favorite story to tell about the military. And the reason it's my favorite story is I was terrified of the water. I was so scared, even more than combat. Man, shoot me. Like, I don't want to drown. I was terrified of the water. So to go into this, to dive into the 15-foot deep end of the pool when I had never been in water deeper than waist height at this point in my life, I'm deathly afraid of the water. It was a massive accomplishment. We all know, I hope we all know what it's like to overcome a big fear. And if you don't, hopefully stories like this will help you. But man, it was a huge turning point in how I looked at myself. It was a huge turning point. This is why bold goals are important, because they push you to your edges. This by choosing to join the military and pursue special forces, and by choosing to accept Sergeant Smith's challenge that day, it pushed me past my fear to move forward in what I wanted to be and what I wanted to do with my life at the time. And it just changed the way I looked at myself, and it started making me think like maybe all the bullying and the teasing that I went through when I was growing up, like maybe there was some use in it, right? And you got to remember, the story I told myself as a kid is I'm going through all this trauma and struggle because one day it's going to be useful for something. And on that day at that pool, I'm 25 years old. I it's like I began to understand my childhood and all the trauma involved in it in a new way, because that trauma and that pain and that anger helped me push past this obstacle.